but it is emotional.
I don't think the emotion is in the decision itself.
The emotion is 100% in the decision.
The emotion is in the person making the decision. So I have to justify why I favor my daughter, which is pretty easy to do.
Well, think about it this way. All right. You want to look at this as an outside perspective. But what outside perspective are you thinking about this in? See, let's say you're just another person.
Mhm.
You're an outsider. What position are you taking up? I'm looking at this situation. Am I going to take the position that I'm going to put myself in that guy's shoes? Because I can do that.
Right.
We can put ourselves in
But
the
not,
man's
not
shoes
always accurate,
of.
especially if you disagree with that person.
So what is it?
So this is the dilemma.
All right.
Okay?
Yes.
So you don't watch this in a
Yeah.
year and forget what it was about. Your niece is drowning,
And your daughter.
and your daughter is drowning.
Treated exactly. You run down and see what's the matter because they're screaming, and you discover that they hadn't listened and they'd gone for a swim, and no one else is on the beach. The girls are really struggling, particularly your niece, who isn't as strong of a swimmer as your daughter. You swim out quickly, but then when you get there, where is there? Is there like smack dab in the middle of the
Who
two of them?
cares?
You realize that there's no way you'll be able to get both of the girls back to shore. You need to decide which girl to rescue first. You have enough strength and energy to rescue both of them, but you can only do it one at a time. You look at the two girls, and your niece is really struggling to hold her head above the water, and you know that if you take your daughter back first, there will be little or no chance that she will survive. Your daughter is struggling also, but is a much stronger swimmer, and you estimate that if you take your niece back to shore first, there's a 50%. There's probably a 50% chance that your daughter will be able to stay afloat long enough for your return, but you simply don't know how long she will hold on for. Now, you wanted to say your premise that you can't argue to save your daughter first is that you can't take an objective.
Right. So the
thing is that you can't.
This is how I go about answering this question from scratch. Okay. So you start off with, all right, let's make this less complicated. Two people are drowning. One of them, if you save person A and person B, if you save person B, person A will die. If you save person A, person B has a 50% chance of dying.
Then obviously
person A.
You save that way. You have a higher chance of saving too.
So the first
but that's
question,
extremely simplifying this.
Right, it is. So I'm going to take it further now. Okay. So the question you have to answer to approach this question is, at what point does the importance of person B become so much that it's worth sacrificing person A?
The precedents drown. Okay, never mind. Damn it.
So this is
you?
where it gets hard, because you would say if person B was just like the Pope, then, or I don't know.
You're not letting the Pope drown.
Not
You'll let Trump drown, but you're not letting the Pope drown.
But here's what I'm saying, right? This is where it gets tricky.
Look at an old man. Oh, he's an old man.
Yeah.
An old man and a baby are drowning.
Let's keep A neutral to make this easier, because the next step would be, now, what if A was a different... I think what it comes down to, right, is, here's the two values you're weighing. Right? When does somebody become what's the word? Inexpendable? Not expendable? Yeah. When does a person become not expendable? At what point? Because you could list off tons of different people, right? You have different relationships. You know what I mean? So at what point does a person become not expendable? That's a hard question to answer. Because it'll be, and I think it's different for people.
Here's the thing. Let's switch it up for a second.
Because
like you were saying, keep A neutral. Keep A neutral. Let's say A is not neutral.
But you're making it more complicated now.
Your daughter and your wife are drowning.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you going after?
Daughter.
quick argument to say why you chose to bring her into this world.
Okay.
Are you now going to choose to take her out of it?
I think that's you're complicating things because you could say a couple of things in response to that. Such
You
as
brought your daughter
your
into this
argument
world.
works both ways. It's double-sided.
It's not, because you did not bring your wife into this world.
Right, but if you want to talk about rights,
What would your wife choose?
ethically, what would I think the daughter?
The daughter.
Hopefully the daughter.
Hopefully the
I
daughter.
hope the daughter.
Oh God.
But it's possible that they wouldn't.
It is possible, but you would hope that they would choose to save your daughter.
Right.
I think in a scenario where you would give up your own life to save the other person, rather than let them die,
Like, this is the idea, right?
throws it out of the
Let's
water.
say this actually happens, and I choose my daughter. The niece drowns. All right. After, set aside the emotional baggage that
What's
I
the
now have.
aftermath? What's
The aftermath.
You now have
If
to deal with
people
your
are
daughter.
mad at me for my decision, how would I make them understand? And I think your immediate reaction is to say that you can't.
No, you can't.
Okay.
This should be actually, in that question, this should be extremely easy. Because they don't know this. You estimate that there's a chance, that there's a higher chance of saving one or the other. Any outside person
Mhm.
is going to assume that it was one or the other.
No.
Yes.
So let's say they do know that then.
Then they're mind readers. And I don't trust them. The witches will burn them at the stake. Right now. Wiccans are fine, but witches, no. We burn them. Tar and feather. Make them chickens. Baka. But the thing is,
Marsupials?
your argument before was to look at it from an outside perspective. Right? But the thing about when
My
you-
argument for which side? My side or
any
my
side.
not side?
You wanted to be able to argue it from an outside perspective.
I wanted
The
to be
thing
able
is
to,
that-
yeah. Well, not from an outside perspective, but I wanted to be able to argue against people who disagreed with my decision.
I think you need to go with the emotional side because that is your, no pun intended, hook, line, and sinker.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But it's a terrible one if you just say it that way. There's a better way to say it. Because I think I need a good way of putting them into my shoes.
I don't know, you got small feet, man.
Essentially,
It's hard.
it's like, shut up. Shut up. Essentially, it's like, here's what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to say, this is the situation I was in. This is my worldview. These are the things I like and dislike, etc. I want to be able to explain that to them.
If you
Give them
want
a
to,
scenario
if you want to articulate,
well enough so that
For you.
I don't even have to explain it.
You don't
They
want-
would know, all right, that is what I would do too, given all that information.
given your information, given
Mhm.
that, I think you need to stress the importance of family.
Right, but how do you do that?
Because the thing is, your argument is for you. Ultimately, your argument isn't for anybody else.
Right.
The goal is why are you thinking this way, and to justify your own decision for you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to adjust it. We've already established that you don't really give a crap what anyone else thinks. If somebody were to tell you they don't want to speak to you anymore because you chose to save your daughter over your niece, you're gonna say bye-bye.
Mm. But this is what I'm saying is what if I wanted both? What if I wanted to have it my way with my decision? Because I'm not going to change my decision right based off of other people's opinions.
No. You're not.
However, once I've made my decision, I do care about the other people's opinions still. Right? So then
Okay.
then it becomes how do I get my way with them?
You need to make it so that they would pick their daughter.
Right.
You need to
I think
take out the analytical.
well, I no, but I think the best way to explain the emotion, because there's ways. The best way is to just describe the how different the type of relationship it is.
But that is an emotional basis.
Right. But
But
it's
I
one
think
grounded in fact.
It
Like,
is grounded
you
in
can
fact.
say for
But I'm saying take them out of the purely analytical. Tether them to something. You want them to empathize with you and to feel in a connection. Because anyone who is, the thing is, you need to bring them back.
I'll tell you.
That's an actuality.
I have an adverse.
Unless they are a sociopath,
Uh-huh.
you need to bring them back. They are disconnecting themselves from the situation, so you need to reconnect them.
I don't know that it's a necessary argument, and I don't want to make that appeal. And the reason I don't is because you probably already know this. I've watched ridiculous amounts of religious debates, just absurd amounts. And that is absolutely what the religious side of all of the religious debates, the people who are not atheistic, always emotional appeals.
All right, so
I don't like emotional appeals because they're inherently unreliable, especially when you're trying to agree on something.
I think those are different emotional appeals.
They're probably slightly
They're
different.
no, they're extremely different. If I'm thinking about it the way I'm thinking about it is we're talking emotional appeals that a lot of people say, God and how it's the decision because this is God's will and this is the right thing to do, etc., etc., etc. Correct?
No.
They try to. What is their emotional tether?
There's a few, but the main one is if you just give yourself up to Jesus, like if you just choose to believe even though it doesn't make sense, then everything will make sense to you. That's kind of what it is. It's an appeal to faith. The fact that faith, if you have faith in God's existence, all of your stresses, it'll all go away. Which is probably true, but it's not right to do that because you are not going to find truth.
That's a very different scenario, even though that is not that's a faith-based, and it is emotionally based, but it's a different sense because the thing about parenthood versus this is one. We're going with the assumptions that you chose to be a parent. You chose to keep this child. You chose to bring this child into the world.
Right.
You have now, this child is 7. You have now invested. You have now made connections with this child. You have raised them. You have taught them to ride a bike. You've taught them to walk. You've celebrated birthdays. You've helped them through sickness.
Nah, I missed
them.
the second birthday because
You had work, okay?
I forgot to take off that day.
Yeah, that's very like
the third Deadpool came out.
Yeah, but the thing is that those are an inherent thing based on a text and faith. They are inherent in faith, in believing something that isn't there, that doesn't exist. That's belief in something that doesn't exist.
Right.
Versus our thing is based in something that has, in your lifetime, developed over time. That there is actual now connections and synapses have now formed pathways based on your relationship with this person. Certain memories, there is connections between parents and their children. There are emotional connections, and that it is rooted in that it's easy to take an analytical, objective perspective to say, no, you should save, if you have a higher chance of saving 2 people, save 2 people.
Mm-hmm.
But most people won't do that. They'll try to argue to the best of their ability that they would. But when push comes to shove, if someone they love and they care about and that they've they're responsible for 100%, it adds a new level to it,
Right.
especially in that. I'm trying to figure out how to word this.
It's hard.
It is hard.
I think I know where you're going. But please continue.
And it's not just humans. It's every animal.
Mm-hmm.
It's this. This is.
Well, except for, I mean, that's not actually true.
That
Some
is,
animals eat their young.
They do. But we don't do that. I hope not. I really hope there aren't people who do that.
There definitely are people who did do that.
Shut up. I don't want to think about that. We don't talk about those people. But you can try to look at this objectively. But the thing about an objective thinking is that you need to be completely objective. There needs to be no emotional ties. There needs to be. If you try to put yourself in that person's situation, you need to account that context matters.
Context matters.
Context matters.
Like, there's a difference between they're drowning and I have to save one versus I have to shoot my niece to save my daughter, or I have to close my eyes, spin the roulette, shoot my daughter, and then hope the bullet isn't in the chamber, and then save my niece. Like, that would be like a similar situation, except the difference is in this context, I'm literally the one killing.
Yeah, you're literally pulling the trigger.
Yeah. In which case, the outcome and my decision are different, but there's an emotional contextual difference.
There is a huge emotion.
And I hate the fact that there is, because it makes ethics harder.
The thing is, we always try to argue to our best ability for both of us is a logical standpoint. Something rooted in science, in mathematics, in statistics. That's what our arguments are based on.
Well, reason.
Reason.
Not judgment, but reason.
Yes, purely that we try to take ourselves out of the situation.
Like if I were, yeah.
And that's what everyone's gonna do who argues the other way, is they're gonna pull themselves out of the situation. And the thing is that we can't do that.
But if
Because then we're just lying to
all I
ourselves.
do is try to pull them directly back into the equation from into a first-person perspective, I have to do that really damn well, or else all they're gonna do is kick, scream, and resist. You get me? Because it's very easy to think you'll do something other than what you'll actually do. Right? And I'm not going to I'm not about to even try to convince somebody else that they would act differently than they think they would. Because I can't make that argument, because I don't technically know what they would do.
I think we can be hopeful. I don't know, it's sad to say we can be hopeful that they'd pick a
This is why this is appropriate for psychology, though, because there are ways to explain human behavior that are objective and grounded and provable. And you can say, but you have to have the reasons behind it. You have to say, this is why you can't dispute what I'm saying you would do. You would do this, and there's every reason to think you would do this. And it's not about, like, I don't know, how much free will do you actually have, right? There are certain situations where you don't get to choose what you want.
The
and you don't get to choose
with
what
the
gets you what you
problem
want.
with this argument in your decision is that very few, if any, are parents in your class.
There are a few parents.
As I said, very few, if any.
Yeah, but there's like, they're not as good at arguing as I am, so I'm not worried about them.
No, because they're gonna side with you, and they're actually the ones that you can most easily get to side with you, unless they are terrible parents.
See, but here's the thing: if there's 4 parents that side with me and 1 parent that doesn't, that one
Person's
parent,
a terrible parent.
that one person that doesn't though is gonna fuck up everything.
No.
because my whole emotional appeal is destroyed by one parent who chooses the other way. You get me?
Obviously, they don't love their daughter.
No, it's just that they don't love their daughter more than their niece.
Yeah.
So how do you argue against that? How do I argue to a parent that it would make more sense for them to love their daughter more than their niece? And I think what we just said, it's their type of relationship. But then also, after watching enough Jordan Peterson, there's an identity crisis that happens when you go from being a parent to not being a parent. Like a huge identity crisis. It's bigger than
Wasn't
any
part
other
of your thing
identity.
is you also
like
we need
you
to
can identify yourself as a student, and then when you graduate, you might feel a little lost in the world because I'm not a student anymore. Now I have to figure out.
That's a
another
very
thing to
common
be.
thing that people
Right.
feel
But
they have nowhere to
Think
go.
about how much bigger. Think about that, but magnified to the extent of I was a parent. Now I'm not a parent anymore, and I'm lost. I need to find something else to be that's like being a parent. You get me? That's like
Yeah.
a huge identity thing. So I think that loss is not sufferable. The only way to like fix that, and you can see examples of this. I mean, in my own personal life, you too, I'm sure, have seen examples of this. The best way to overcome, there's only two options, right? Either you're a parent of more than one kid, and you always suffer the loss of that kid no matter what. Obviously, no matter what scenario, unless you're a psychopath or just a terrible person. You always suffer the loss of that kid every time you think about it, whatever. But you can live on knowing that your other kids are alive and can still do good onto them, and then there's no identity crisis anymore because you still have kids. So you're still a parent.
Yep.
Or you don't have kids, and now there is an identity crisis, and then what do you do? All right. So the decision becomes a little harder if you have a lot of kids. If you have 8 kids, right? Like if you just have a crazy number of kids. Not that the more kids you have, the less important each one is. That's not the case. But it is in the sense of your identity. Like your identity is less at risk the more kids you have.
Yeah.
Because being a parent is part of your identity. And the more kids you have, the less likely it is that you lose that identity.
It's almost non-existent at that point because
Pretty
unless
much.
those all die also, then you'll probably just
Just
kill
make sure
yourself.
they don't all take a plane trip to the same place.
Yeah.
On the same plane.
Separate them out of
Yeah, like take 2 flights. Unless all the flights go down, then that would be pretty oof.
morbid.
Alright. We took this to a weird place just now. I did. Not you. You had nothing to do with it. I don't know why I said we. Yeah. So I think that's the argument. That's the psychological, inarguable argument. Like, no matter who you are, there's an identity.
This
But you
this question, the problem isn't in the question. The problem is in you. Because you don't want to argue a certain way.
I want to argue the best way.
Well, that's purely up to one's personal beliefs.
That's true. Best
As
way.
I said,
Well,
problem's not
I mean,
here.
it's individual. It's individualized.
It's in
Okay. Where are you going with that?
nowhere. I was just
No?
making a point.
Here's my perspective, right? So, in the boat dilemma, I fucking killed that. Like I told you about it. I went in there and I slayed them with every question they had. Just boom, boom.
Yeah, but their
But what about
questions
this?
were weak.
Yeah,
Their questions
they were weak. They were weak. You're right.
They were weak. Like
But I was like,
we, as I said,
so I want that to happen again.
I said
Is basically
literally
what my goal
earlier
is.
today how I'm a very analytical thinker and I'm not an emotional thinker. Because I take myself out of the situation. Because for the most part, in situations that we deal with on the day-to-day, they're not anything of the caliber of immediate danger and of life or death. Neither of us have ever had to deal with that situation.
Yeah.
So it's easy for us to take ourselves out of the situation, think about it objectively, because we're not the most easily stressed. And it's harder to pull yourself out of situations in levels of adrenaline and fight or flight mentality. Because then it goes at adrenaline, fight or flight mentality. Your brain, the way you function, doesn't go into a normal process of thinking. It goes into a more Neanderthal, reptilian brain style of thinking, one rooted in instinct and evolution. We are a pack animal, inherent. We are developed in large social groups, just like others. We are designed, and the way we function over evolution is to protect the pack, not the individual. In this scenario, technically you could argue that your pack is your immediate family. That's your pack. We're not an Italian mob. Alright? Your pack is your immediate family. Thus, when you get into a fight or flight mentality and you enter a different level of thinking because you are no longer capable of thinking rationally, because you are in a heightened state of adrenaline, you no longer have the option. So now you are based in instinct. Thus, you would go after your daughter.
See, I know that makes sense, and it does. But there is a counter argument. From my perspective,
I'm on weed.
Listen to me. All right.
So my adrenaline's not pumping through the roof.
So here's the reason I wouldn't want to use that as an argument, even though it could work, is that I believe that if my niece was part of my pack, my immediate family, like let's say the niece was an orphan, and then I was...
Oh, now that's adding a whole new level. The niece is basically a daughter to you.
Right. So, but I think there's a good chance my decision wouldn't change. And it goes back to the fact that the relationship is different. Even though it's much closer to being a daughter.
But it's not.
And I don't think I can be blamed for that, so I think it's a safe argument. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think anybody could really rationally say that it's wrong for me to value the relationship between me and my actual biological daughter more. Because it's not. Like, how do you argue that?
I think if your goal right now, I think for a paper, I think you can write a paper.
Obviously. I could have wrote a paper without any of this.
Yeah. That's easy. But I think you should use everything that we've discussed to your advantage.
I want to go in there and have the best, most well thought out argument for the actual class itself.
I think the best, most well thought out argument is one that you can argue from a multitude of reasonings.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody says, what about this? What about this? Well, we're going, okay. You go emotional side. Boom. Okay, you got that. Dissecting the paper. The numbers don't always add up. Boom. Go into an actual biological reasoning as in adrenaline, fight or flight. Boom. You got that. Go into a psychological standpoint, arguing relationships. We're getting every different angle that we can.
Right. But the most important one is the relationship part. I think, because this was fuzzy, right? Like, before, this was fuzzy. It's not anymore. It's much clearer to me now that we've had the time to, like, thrash it out. But really, like, where is the pivot point of all of this? The most important piece of information is that
she's your daughter.
She's my daughter.
That is the
But what does that mean? That means my identity as a parent, my investment in the past, in the future, my motivation for living.
Maybe not your motivation.
Not for living. but you know what I mean. For the things that I do that I call my life, like
Because your life changes.
the
when you
having
become
the
a
having
parent.
a life part of life.
Yes, you don't have a life. Your life is for your kids.
Right.
Unfortunately, it was Mother's Day.
Unfortunately. How is that a bad thing?
Your life becomes not your own and becomes that for someone else. It's got you basically sacrifice yourself for someone that you created,
I don't want to go the biological route because I can't back it up well,
like I did.
and it's also not always true. Like there are people who are crazy, or I mean, can you even call them crazy? They're just ill. You know, like that one woman from the with the blanket. Obviously, I'm not arguing against that woman, so thank God for that. Because you know, there's no winning. Like she's ill. So,
She's going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
but yeah. So, I think the next most annoying thing that I'm gonna face now is just gonna be the but. What about the possibility? What about the possibility?
That you could have saved both.
Yeah. The
You still
cost
have
of
one.
the cost of that
You still have one.
possibility.
You still have one.
Yeah. Neglecting that because I think it's ingenuous to point to that.
Then I think it's ingenuous to use the statistic that you have a possibility of saving them in the first place, both of them. If their argument is
All right.
based on the text, then use the text to your advantage.
I guess, but I don't want to because I think that the text.
Okay, Gone.
But I don't think that actually.
Here's the
changes anything. I
the
want to
trap.
win this the right way. Damn it!
Okay, Gone. You're literally him.
You're totally right.
You're just like, you could argue this, which would work. No, I don't wanna.
But that's not the best way. That's not my favorite way to do it,
That's
Nick.
not. Yeah, that's
is
not
not my
your
favorite
way
way.
to do.
People won't even. I love that Louis C.K. People don't want to not do their favorite thing. They don't even want to do their second favorite thing. They have to do their favorite thing.
You're
Like,
proving that right
like
now.
if you're driving, they could go the best, like the closest way. They'll cut through 7 lanes of traffic just to go the way that they wanted to go, instead of just like another 5 minutes down the road and turning left there, because it's not their favorite way. Because if I argue that there's still a chance that I can get both either way, they're just gonna say to me, yeah, but it's so small, it's practically nothing. So what do I say to that? I've now brought myself into a little bit of a rabbit hole that I didn't need to bring myself into.
It means there's still a chance.
But it's negligible, isn't it?
No. Doesn't say that. Little or.
Little too, no.
And technically, in terms of sentential logic, or means and or.
Unless it's an exclusive or.
Yes, but in this case, it does not seem to be an exclusive or.
Could
And,
be.
it does, and actually, in sentential logic, you need to specify that it is an exclusive or.
Fuck you. You're right. I lose.
And so will all of them. That's your goal.
I don't want to get into sentential logic.
Why not? It's not the best way.
It's not my favorite way, Nick.
It's not your favorite way. And I'm sitting here sewing as we're having this argument.
That's great. Oh, God.
Let's not even bring God into this.
No, actually, that would. I feel like debating the existence of God would be way easier than this. I really do, but that's only because I've listened to so much crap. about
God
it.
was going to have Abraham sacrifice his son.
Yeah.
And he was ready to do it for God.
Can
But
I
then
tell
God's
you
like,
something?
no, don't do that.
Did you just learn about that recently?
No, I've known about that.
Oh, okay, good. Because I was gonna say, there's a few things that I always had trouble with when I was in religion classes and still
Your
kind
faith
of believe.
comes precedent over your child. And that's a
That-
very common
that
thing,
one-
actually.
We talked about that particular event in
That-
religion class, and the whole point of that story, according to the church that
is
I
that
went to,
faith is more important than family.
is that faith in God pays off.
It doesn't.
Because God is righteous and yeah.
No. A few people make a
Oh,
bad
obviously.
decision, so he wipes out the entire population. He does that twice.
But he loves you.
No, he said, "F you. I'ma kill you."
Even though he
and
made
your
you
cow.
himself. The way you are. And he has a plan
So
for you.
I can blame him for everything wrong in my life then. Every biological
You probably
flaw.
don't even think that the earth is flat, bro. That's how in the bubble you are. That's how those nassholes have you brainwashed.
You know, we would be offending people right now if we actually had a viewership.
Yeah. Well, is this live?
Yes,
Ooh. Cool.
it's the only way I can do it. Also, I think this camera's probably uploading better than my laptop was.
You're probably right.
Oh well.
Is this on Facebook?
No, it's on
What is it?
YouTube.
Okay. Twitch channel.
Not a podcast.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's not.
It's not.
It's not a podcast.
I don't know what this is.
How do you think the audio is?
Probably pretty crappy.
Yeah.
You could probably pull it up on your phone. But that sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, I don't
really want you to do. I don't want to.
like move and no,
Listen.
no, no,
way too much.
no way. So to start off the paper, I mean, can I start it off by saying, right, that I would say rescue my daughter, because the first sentence has to be what I did and why, in the most generalized sense. So the first thing is going to be I would choose to rescue my daughter, but there's so many things I could say after that as the reason. What is the best option? I think there's two things I have to go to. First is the instinct thing, because it's just so fundamentally true to the whole thing, which is that it would not be a matter of question. Because my identity as a parent is that my first responsibility is to my child. So I wouldn't even have the opportunity to choose something else without completely threatening my identity, which is psychologically, I don't think there's a way to bypass that unless you have two identities and one of them is also, and the other one is threatened by the opposite decision.
In which case you explode.
Yeah.
Multiple
Or
personality
no, you
disorder.
split into 4 personalities at that point.
Multiple personality disorder. Have fun.
So,
Your daughter has multiple personality disorder.
Right.
She has 3 personalities. Does she count as one person or 3? They each identifies it. One identifies as a male, one identifies as a female, the other identifies as an Apache helicopter. They each have different names. One is Martha, one is George, one is Steven. 3. Does your daughter now count as 3 people?
I wasn't even listening, actually. I don't know what you just said. I just heard something about 3 people and does and...
Your daughter has multiple personality disorder.
Who's
She
more
has 3
important?
person.
Well,
She has
if-
3.
but
She
if
has
she's
3
not your daughter when she dies, if she's one of the other 2 personalities, then it's okay to say
The girl you gave birth to a girl named Martha. Then she developed multiple personality disorder and developed 2 more personalities. One identifies as a male named Richard. The other one identifies as an Apache helicopter named
Not an attack battle toaster?
not an attack battle toaster. Apache helicopter named
Is she undergoing helicopter surgery?
when she is in.
Is she getting the blades installed?
When they identify, not she, when they identify as an Apache helicopter,
Zen.
they try to argue that, but then you just wait it out until they identify as one of the other 2. So now your daughter, because we're
I
we're
can say
assuming
she
Martha.
because she didn't have her pronouns legally.
You don't need to have your pronouns.
That's only in
legally
Canada
changed.
though.
So now, does your daughter count as 3 people or as 1?
Definitely 2.
Okay, now your niece does not have multiple personality disorder. Who do you save? 2 people or the guarantee of saving 2, or the possibility?
Well, if there's a potential for the 3 personalities to merge back to 1, then can you say that that's 3 people?
I throw the arm brace at you.
God damn.
How'd you miss
Too
that?
deep, bro. I wasn't supposed to catch it, was it?
I don't know. Maybe you were.
Maybe it was just random.
Probably. We've established that random does exist. Unfortunately for you.
I hate it. I hate it because it's a tricky word. The word random is tricky. It could be used for evil. I like the word chaos a lot better than random.
Quantum chaos.
I like chaos because it at least acknowledges that there is a method to the madness. Because when I think of chaos, I think of chaos theory.
That's not chaos. Chaos is inherently also random.
Well, chaos and random is like the same thing. It's synonymous. But I like the word better because the connotation leans more towards.
Also, it's got a better mouthfeel. Chaos.
You know what has a better
Random.
mouthfeel?
Gumbo.
I was gonna say Arby's meats.
Arby's. We have the meats.
How you like them mouthfeels? So the opening line to my essay. You haven't I would have rescued my daughter because it would have been.
What I learned in boating school is the break time.
It would become once I have a daughter, right, it becomes central to my identity that my highest priority be the daughter.
Now, your highest priority be your family. Don't limit to just your daughter.
No,
Limit to family.
it's not. Of course, it's just me. All I care about is me. Why would I even rescue either of them when I
Okay.
can just walk away and do something more productive with my life, like get money or have sex with all the other girls on the beach.
Because there was no one else on the beach. The beach was empty. It says so.
Oh, that's true. Well, there's hermit crabs. I could figure something out.
No, the hermit crabs would have saved your daughter.
Well, they wouldn't.
Yeah, they would. Actually, yeah, they would have saved your niece first. Cause
You're probably right. Yeah, well, they don't have a horse in the race, so of course. They
No,
save the
actually,
niece.
no. The hermit crabs would have saved your daughter, but the clams, they would have saved your niece first.
Clams are fucking
Crabs-
stupid.
Stupid.
You're
There,
dumb.
I said it.
Dumb, bro.
Dumb.
They don't know anything. They can't even read Shakespeare.
You don't even know how to translate binary.
Calligraphic Morse code.
Calligraphic.
Calligraphic Morse code.
Calligraphy.
Calligraphy.
Is it, you were trying calligraphy?
I made up a word, but
Calligraphic.
actually it might be a real word. I don't know. I might have checked that. I probably did.
There was a word that I thought I made up, but then I looked it up and it actually existed. I was like, what?
I wonder if that's how all things came into existence. Like the universe had a thought. What if I wasn't nothing?
The universe was a thought.
And then that became everything. Except for
No, Morgan Freeman. He narrated.
right. Never
He
mind.
narrated the universe. That's why it exists.
Right. Forgot. Technically, I couldn't forget because I didn't know until Morgan Freeman narrated me knowing just
I
now.
think you should actually work on your paper, considering it is now
I think I'm
3:30 in the morning.
I am now capable of doing it too.
All right.
Well, I was capable again. All right, whatever. I'm gonna shut up. 'Cause there's too much. Can't be held responsible for my time anymore. Everything we